Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. This week I want to talk about the GTR and how it's not a great daily driver. For those of you who saw last week's video, this is actually a companion video to that, which is where I discuss the R35 as a great daily driver. If you didn't see that video, I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in a banner above my head, as well as a link in the description down below if you want to check that out. For those of you who know me, you know I actually do daily drive my R35, and I think it's completely worth it as a daily driver. This is actually a better daily driver than my Supra, my RX-7, my R32 GTR, my S2000. This is probably one of the better daily drivers I've ever had. However, I do want to give you both sides of the coin. So there are some things about this car that if you plan on using it as a daily, might be a little bit annoying to you and may dissuade you from actually using this as your daily. I just want to make sure you're aware of those things, and that's what this video is all about. The first thing I want to talk about is something that I wasn't even aware of until I'd bought one of these things, and that's just how low this car sits. If you're like me, all of my previous cars, typically I had to lower on either coilovers or a shock and spring combo because they sit really high, probably just so they can clear driveways. This car already sits pretty low. I'm used to about a 3-finger wheel gap stock, and this sucker's only got a 1-finger wheel gap. Also, this front lip stock is only about 5 inches off the ground, which means if you have a steep driveway, you're going to be scraping this on quite a regular occurrence. Also, you have to figure it's not only your personal driveway, but it's also any driveway you go to, like if you're going grocery shopping or just even out and about. So that's something to be aware of if you want to use this as a daily driver. You will be scraping. As you can see, you can tell that the previous owners with this car have had the same issue, and you can see all the damage that it's caused. A lot of that damage was before I bought this car. I've only had it for about 4 months. It's not only the front lip you have to worry about, but where I live, the parking lot's actually pretty flat, but then the driveway's at a bit of an angle, and I've even scraped in the middle of this car, even taken as an angle. So just remember that if you want to use this car as a daily driver, it does sit low and you will scrape. And while we're talking about ride height, might as well talk about the suspension. The GTR is notorious for having very stiff suspension. So if you're expecting a car that's going to ride like a Cadillac or a Camry, this isn't your car. It's going to be stiff. Now, if you're like me and you're used to running cars that have coilovers or a shock and spring combo anyways, it's not going to be that big of a difference. And yes, the car does come with a selection switch where you can put it in comfort mode, regular mode, or R mode. So you can adjust your suspension to be softer or stiffer depending on what it is you're doing that day. However, it's not a huge change. Now, in the 2014s on up, they did soften the suspension. So if you're looking at an 09 through a 13, be prepared for the suspension to pretty much be stiff all the time. If you're looking at a 14 on up, it will be a little bit softer and a little bit more manageable as a daily driver. For me though, a stiff suspension isn't really a deal breaker, and it's not even that big of a deal in all honesty. If you saw my video where I drove this car between Seattle and Los Angeles, I found that having a stiff suspension really didn't affect the ride. When you're cruising on the freeway, it still moves pretty smooth. The only time it was a real issue is when I was dealing with either speed bumps or ridiculously rough roads. So with that in mind, you'll have to decide for yourself whether or not you can deal with the suspension as it is. Another thing to consider if you're going to be using this as a daily driver is this is not a quiet car. This is a loud car. It makes noises. The exhaust makes loud noises. The transmission makes noises and clunks. And sometimes the brakes squeak. So if you're used to a car that can kind of fly under the radar until you take it to the track or the canyons, this is not your car. And of course, with all that noise, grabs attention, which means when you drive by any police officer, they're gonna notice you. Also, if you live in a neighborhood where you have to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, your neighbors will hear it. So depending on your relationship with your neighbors, that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing. Another thing to consider if you're going to be using your GTR as your daily driver is the cost of repair and maintenance. The GTR is notoriously expensive to repair and maintain. To give you an idea, to have Nissan do a full brake job on this car is going to run you about $4 to $5 grand. For them to do the oil change, you're looking at about $250 to $350. And the other day I was pricing out spark plugs to do on this car, and the spark plugs alone are $120. Now, fortunately, as time has gone on, there have been some aftermarket dealers that have come up with alternative parts which are a little bit more cost effective. For example, I got a full set of rotors, pads, and steel braided brake lines from Speed by Design, and those only ran me about $1,300, which is on par with a lot of other cars I've owned in my life. If you want to do the oil change yourself, you can actually get the Mobil 1 full synthetic 0W40 from Walmart, and it ran me about $35. So there are some things which are becoming more cost effective. This is of course also predicated on you doing the work yourself. To pay a certified GTR tech or somebody who's just specialized in GTRs, you're looking at spending $135 at a minimum per hour of their shop time. So if you're not able to work on this car yourself, you're gonna have to factor that into your cost. So if you're gonna use this car as your daily driver, be prepared to either be your own wrench or pay a premium to keep it on the road. The next thing I want to talk about, I'm gonna have to do something I don't do very often, and that's go handheld, because it's gonna be difficult to get my equipment where it is I'm going, and that is the back seat. Now, if you're considering this car thinking it's gonna be a good daily driver because you can take people with you, that's both true and not at the same time. For example, I can get into the back seat and even close the passenger chair. And as you can see, I actually have a fair amount of leg room. It's not too bad. Headroom though is a little tight. I am slouching down, but it's not horrible. But I'm only 5'10". Anyone taller than me is probably gonna have issues. However, the caveat to this is, although this works for the passenger side, it's not gonna work too well for the driver's side. Now that is my seating position set up, and I'm 5'10". And where that sits in comparison to the rear seat, I can pretty much fit about a fist, and that's it. So basically, the cool thing is the passenger seat though, when you look at it, there is a lot of leg room on there. And you can actually get your legs pretty deep underneath that dash and still be comfortable, as well as give enough space for the person in the back. But I don't think they're going to want to sit back here for too terribly long unless they're my height or shorter. So what this means is you could probably carry maybe 3 adults for an okay trip, or 3 adults and a child if they're in a child seat, or 2 adults and 2 children will be fine. I have taken people on about 45-minute car rides where the person in the passenger seat is, you know, they're about my height so they can move the chair up, and the person in the back seat's about my height or a little bit shorter, and everybody was fine. But anything bigger than that, the rear seat's really not that usable. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this car is fuel economy. For those of you who saw my video last week where I talked about how awesome the fuel economy is with this car, that's because I was coming off of daily drivers such as a Mark IV Supra Turbo or an FD RX-7 or an R32 Skyline GTR. And there I'm only used to getting about 16 to 18 miles to the gallon on Supreme. Some of you watching this video, you might be coming off of more fuel economic cars such as like a Camry or Civic, where you might be getting like 35 miles to the gallon on regular, or even some fuel hybrid cars where you're used to getting 45 or 50 miles. On this car, I'm seeing about 20.9 miles per gallon and an average of 35.3 miles per hour. Let's just go ahead and say 21 miles per gallon. So for me, coming off of those previous cars, I actually gained fuel economy. This car is actually more fuel economic than my previous cars. Also, looking at my average speed of 35.3 miles per hour, you know that's not freeway driving. That is true city driving, getting 21 miles to the gallon. For me, that's great coming off of 18, but if you're used to something a lot more, you're actually getting less fuel economy, which means you're gonna be spending more on fuel, plus you're stepping up from regular to Supreme. So that's something for you to consider. If this is gonna be your daily driver, are you okay with that fuel economy? And there they are. Those are some reasons that I found why the GTR might not be the best daily driver. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. It does help the channel out a lot. If you want to see more GTR content in the future, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or you feel there's anything I've missed, go ahead and post in the comments down below. I will respond to you. I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all out on the road.